I still remember that evening as if it happened yesterday. The light outside was fading into that golden glow that always seems to make everything look softer, calmer, as though the world is trying to whisper that tomorrow will be better. I was sitting in the living room with a cup of coffee that had already gone cold, staring at the television but not really watching it. My mind was somewhere else, wrapped in a fog of worry that had been hanging over me for weeks. My son, Matthew, had been distant for some time now. He wasn't the same kid who used to run down the stairs 2 at a time, laughing about some joke his friends had made or telling me about a new video game he wanted. Instead, there was a heaviness about him, like he was carrying a backpack filled with stones that he refused to put down. I tried asking him a few times what was wrong, but each time he'd brush it off with the same tired answers. "I'm fine, Mom," or "Nothing, don't worry about it." And of course, being his mother, worrying was exactly what I did. That evening, though, something was different. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, slow, hesitant, as if each step was a decision he had to make. He came into the living room and stood there for a moment, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. His eyes avoided mine, fixed on the floor, then the wall, then finally landing on me with a seriousness that sent a shiver through me. He said quietly, almost in a whisper, "Mom, can we talk?" My heart skipped, because I had been waiting for those words for so long. I nodded, patting the couch next to me, but he shook his head. "No, in my room. Just us, please." That was when I knew this was serious, more serious than I had imagined. I sat down my coffee, followed him up the stairs, and when we got into his room, he closed the door. The sound of that door clicking shut echoed in my chest. That evening, my son closed the door and finally told me everything. I sat on the edge of his bed while he paced back and forth, his hands fidgeting. He looked like he was searching for the right words, but couldn't quite find them. I tried to break the silence. "Matthew, whatever it is, you can tell me. You don't have to be afraid." He stopped, his back to me, and I saw his shoulders shake just slightly. When he finally turned around, his eyes were red. "I've been keeping something from you, Mom, and it's been eating me alive." My chest tightened. I reached for his hand, but he pulled it away, not out of anger, but out of fear that maybe once he said it, everything would change. "You'll be mad," he whispered. I shook my head. "There is nothing you could tell me that would make me stop loving you." Those words must have been the key he needed, because he finally sat down beside me, took a deep breath, and began. "Do you remember a few months ago when I started coming home late from school?" he asked. Of course, I remembered. I had noticed it immediately. Sometimes he'd come in with excuses about group projects or basketball practice, even though I knew the season hadn't started. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I remember." He swallowed hard. "It wasn't practice, and it wasn't schoolwork either. I was helping someone who needed it, but I couldn't tell you because I thought you'd think I was stupid or that I'd get in trouble." I tilted my head, confused, but relieved it didn't sound as terrible as I had feared. "Helping who?" I asked. That was when he told me the story that changed everything I thought I knew about those missing hours. He told me about a man named Daniel, someone he had met near the park on his walk home. Daniel wasn't like the other people Matthew knew. He was older, maybe in his 30s, and he didn't seem to have a home. Matthew had first noticed him sitting on a bench day after day, wrapped in the same worn-out jacket, looking like the world had forgotten him. One day, Matthew had stopped and offered him half of his sandwich, and Daniel had accepted it with tears in his eyes. He said he hadn't eaten in 2 days, his mom explained, his voice breaking. And I couldn't just walk away after that. So, day after day, Matthew started visiting Daniel. He would bring him food from our kitchen, sometimes sneaking out leftovers I hadn't even noticed missing. He would sit with him, listen to his stories, and even bring him clean clothes he managed to collect. I just
I felt like he didn't have anyone, and I wanted to be that someone, Matthew said. Tears were rolling down his cheeks now, and I was speechless. My son, my teenage boy, who I thought had been pulling away from me, had actually been carrying a secret burden of kindness far bigger than himself. But then his voice dropped lower, trembling. "It's not just that, Mom. Something happened last week, and I didn't know what to do." My heart was in my throat again.
I asked gently. He explained that when he went to see Daniel one evening, Daniel wasn't at the park bench. Instead, Matthew found him in an alleyway, doubled over, coughing and barely able to breathe. Matthew had panicked, unsure if he should call for help, scared that the man might die. He ended up helping Daniel to a nearby shelter and stayed with him until volunteers arrived. "They told me he has pneumonia," Matthew said, "and they asked how I knew him. I didn't know what to say. I just said he was my friend. But Mom, I didn't want you to find out like this. I didn't want you to think I was sneaking around or doing something wrong. I was just trying to help." At that moment, I realized all those late nights I had spent worrying he might be in trouble, making bad choices, hanging out with the wrong crowd, had been completely misplaced. My son wasn't hiding mistakes. He was hiding his compassion, because he thought I wouldn't understand. I pulled him into my arms, and he finally let himself cry on my shoulder the way he used to when he was little. I whispered to him that I wasn't mad, that I was proud of him, prouder than words could ever say. "Matthew," I said softly, "you have the kind of heart that this world needs more of. You saw someone hurting, and you helped even when it was hard. That doesn't make me angry. It makes me love you even more." He sniffled, pulling back to look at me. "So you're not upset I didn't tell you sooner?" I smiled through my own tears. "I wish you had, because I would have wanted to help too. But I understand why you didn't. You thought you had to carry this alone. You don't, Matthew. You never have to carry things alone." That evening in his room with the door closed, a weight lifted from both of us. He had finally told me everything, and it changed the way I saw not only him, but the quiet strength of his heart. Over the next few days, we started visiting Daniel together. I met him at the shelter where he was recovering, and he turned out to be one of the most gentle, thoughtful people I had ever spoken to. Life had dealt him a hard hand, lost jobs, family struggles, illness, but beneath it all, he still had hope. He told me how much Matthew's kindness had meant to him, how it gave him a reason to keep going when he felt invisible to the world. Listening to that, I felt an overwhelming pride in my son. I had spent weeks worrying about the wrong things, when the truth was he was quietly becoming a young man I could admire. And maybe, just maybe, that night when he closed the door and told me everything, he gave me a gift too. The chance to see him not just as my little boy, but as someone who could change lives with his compassion.